in this bill.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, that's one big reform there that Obamacare took away. Gives you a little better chance of keeping your doctor and paying for it and so forth. But the problem is, they have two big problems. One is they've been winning elections. They've displaced 1,000 Democratic state lawmakers, 17 governors, taken over the Senate and the House with strong and strengthening majorities on the promise to get rid of this. So it wasn't a promise to do something later. It wasn't a promise to replace. It was a promise to repeal. So, but now you come to the reality of you've signed up all these people, for not just Obamacare but Medicaid expansion in the states. And so there's going to have to be off ramps, and there's going to have to be something that moves you to the next thing. And they don't even operate from the assumption that there should be a next thing. So, a lot of the people in the conference.
Daniel, do you think there's a risk that this will wind up being the end game and it will be a half-baked solution?
I'm hoping it'll be a half-baked solution. No, I mean, I think, the Medicaid piece of this is actually the piece that's working better for individuals because the federal government, in conjunction with the states, are picking up the tab, and so you don't have these problems of an insurance pool where there just aren't enough healthy people in it, and premiums are going up. So it's been a pretty good deal for the states thus far, and obviously Medicaid's reimbursement rate is pretty low, so you do have limited choice in terms of your providers. But these are low-income people, many of whom did not have insurance before, and you got states like Arkansas, West Virginia, and Kentucky, extremely Republican states that have benefited enormously from this because they weren't, prior to that, they weren't even covering all the people under the poverty line. So, look, I don't care about an off-ramp because I'd like to see more public health insurance. I think it works better. But in terms of just the way this fares politically, here's an interesting idea, which is that just as Trump said, this thing could implode. So if this fails and Trump gets impatient with it, I do think that there's a decent chance that insurers will continue pulling out of the exchanges, and premiums will continue to go up, and the exchanges will in some way fall apart, and you'll have all these individuals who are not eligible for Medicaid and don't get it through their job and will be in trouble. How that plays out politically, whether Democrats get blamed for it or Republicans, now that they've at least started to try to reform the system, I'm not sure.
There's also, they've already taken away the penalties for not complying with the mandate. So, I mean, it's on a glide path to destruction now.
Moving on, my apologies. President Trump caused some major controversy this week by tweeting about possible wiretapping of Trump Tower before the election. Here's the story from CNN.
Tonight, FBI officials are demanding a flat-out denial from the Justice Department, but not yet getting one. This after President Trump went on a Twitter tirade Saturday, tweeting, "Terrible. Just found out that Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory. Nothing found. How low has President Obama gone to tap my phones? Bad or sick guy?"
Brian, I'm curious not only about the potential validity to his accusations and allegations, but I'm also curious about the way he's handled the whole thing. Where do you stand on that?
I think that his timing is, he's hit him in the mouth. Mike Tyson said everybody has a plan until you get hit in the mouth, and they're reeling and trying to figure out. This is our president. Right, but I mean, he has given them something that they had to stop and react to. They first said, no, there's no evidence, we absolutely didn't do this. Then, well, yeah, we did. We applied for, 3 FISA warrants. FISA is pretty much a rubber stamp court, right? With, so the first 2, they said, hey, this is campaign related, this is not national security related, and turned down their warrants. It was only the 3rd time when they went back in October and took the focus off of Trump that they were able to get the warrants. The problem for the Democrats now is they listen in on a lot of stuff. They don't really have anything to show for it. There's not really any smoking guns that they overheard. So now you have to get off of this without, the political damage of, because otherwise you're looking at Watergate, bugging the candidate of the other party. I mean, that's basically what it is at this point.
Kelly, what's your position on this whole story?
I'll take a little different tack here. I see unsubstantiated claims by President Trump that the Trump towers were bugged and he was being wiretapped. I also see unsubstantiated claims so far on the Democrat side, who have been pushing this repeated claim that the Trump administration or the then Trump campaign was somehow in collusion with the Russians to thwart the election. And they've been hammering at that ceaselessly and pretty hard, to the point where they've gotten Sessions to Attorney General Sessions to recuse himself from the investigation. They thwarted Mike Flynn, so on and so forth. But what I see being lost here is a real debate about government surveillance, because let's face it, we've been talking about this or at least I've been writing about it for several years now, about the government's broadened powers under the Patriot Act to spy on Americans, using foreign surveillance, counter-terrorist authorities that they gained after 9/11. And the Democrats have missed every opportunity to tighten controls on the government and its spying on Americans. And conservatives and Republicans have been so far uninterested, unless they're libertarians like Ron Paul. So right now we have this circus going on. Everybody's throwing, cloak and dagger accusations, but I don't hear anybody saying, well, let's really reform a system in which there are these spying tools out there and they are being used for nefarious reasons. And I think that's being lost because, let's face it, Trump may be complaining about himself being bugged, but so far he doesn't seem to be interested in the rest of America being bugged.
Daniel, do you agree that these are unsubstantiated allegations on both sides?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it reported that they actually were able to get a FISA warrant that took them into a space where they were able to listen to Trump. And I think that even if that were reported, Brian, and I'd be curious to see how you push back on that. That is very, very different than a president going after someone for political reasons. Keep in mind, Obama sat on some of the evidence of Russian intervention in the election because he didn't want to be perceived as intervening. That doesn't sound like the conduct of someone that would use a personal vendetta, that would use the FBI like J. Edgar Hoover did in the 60s against various left-wing critics and against Martin Luther King. So those are two separate things. Look, President Trump is an impulsive person who's, frankly, look, regardless of what I think of his policies and regardless of what I think of his political successes, which are considerable, he's an impulsive person and a vindictive and petty person. And that's the kind of thing that you're seeing in him tweeting in a way, because it's not just this. It's all kinds of theories and opinions, whatever seems to pop into his head. And quite frankly, it is extremely irresponsible for the President of the United States to use the bully pulpit to advance something like that without substantiation, because what it then does is it gives fodder for conspiracy theories. And those aren't my words. Those are the words of Congressman Mike Rogers, who said that there's another quarter in the conspiracy theory meter, a Republican.
Thank you, Daniel. And finally this week, millions of women around the world marked International Women's Day by taking part in the Day Without a Woman protest. But their absence from work caused many schools and other workplaces to shut down, causing hardship for many others. So, Kelly, do you think this was a day of unification or a day of polarization?
Well, I mean, as a woman in the media, I can only tell you what I have observed that day. I think as a media person in the greater Washington, D.C. area, we saw 2 major school systems shut down within 24 hours before the event. So very little notice, particularly Prince George's County, Maryland, which had shut down. I believe it was, I want to say it was less than 18 hours, 12 hours even before the Day Without a Woman. So there were a lot of women there were some women who showed up at the school with their children and not having childcare for that day. And I think that there was this feeling like, what is their message? I mean, they say they're striking, but what are they striking against? And some of the messages you heard filtering in was gender equality, gender pay equality, a lot of the same themes you saw in the Women's March. Well, that's because the women who planned this day are the same women who planned the Women's March 2 days or a day after the inauguration. And I mean, right there, some people's political BS meter goes up because those marches were planned within days after the election out of anger and opposition to the election of Donald Trump. So right off the bat, that march, as big and as successful as it was for those women, was a politically driven march. And I think women who did vote for Donald Trump or didn't vote for Hillary or don't feel like this political drive feel a little left out of what they're being told is their movement. And I don't think all women are responding the same to this.
Daniel, it sounds like Kelly's saying there is a vacuum in terms of strategy for the women's movement today. Where do you see there might be an opportunity to develop that strategy, to develop sort of a way ahead?
Well, I would say because Kelly is right that it was a day that was planned by liberal activists, and regardless of what they might tell you, and I think it was open and welcome to other people's participation, but because, quite frankly, it is planned by liberals, they're not necessarily looking from conservatives for tips as to how to make it more politically effective. I do think the substance of their message could have been clearer, but look, the idea of a strike is actually a powerful tool if you want to use it, and there is unfortunately collateral damage that can have real human impact when you're dealing with people that have to take care of their kids and find a way to deal with that. And I think that's something that just needs to be dealt with better on a case-by-case basis.
I have to say, my experience personally is that feminism has somehow become a tired topic that can't seem to have a real revival. Brian, do you think there's a chance for a way ahead for women to revive this topic in a way that really can make a difference?
Well, it's, like the major underpinnings of it are a problem. For one thing, even the Obama Department of Labor said the wage gap is the result of choices that women make, not systemic discrimination. Thank you.
But these are choices they make because of society as it currently is, the supports that currently exist, and the way men currently act in terms of their gender and their current rights or feelings of what is appropriate. So a lot of those things could change and give women more of the support so that they wouldn't need to make those choices.
Well, can I step in just for 2 seconds?
Okay.
The decision I made to stay home and have children for several years was my decision, and I would have it no other way. But when I went back to work, I was in the same pay grade, if not less than I was when I came back, but I wouldn't do it any different way. I would have preferred to be at home than have my husband at home. So I think it's a little more complicated than just saying it's men's fault.
Oh, I'm not saying it's men's fault. I'm saying there's a societal
sometimes that
structure
message comes through, and when you say you're striking, it sometimes came across yesterday, not by well-meaning people, but in Twitter feeds and Facebook, that somehow men have to pay. They have to be shown that we are valuable. And I'm thinking, the guy sitting next to me at work's pretty valuable too, and if he didn't show up, I
just think there's a discernment to be made between it's men's fault and there are structures that aren't in place. But I hate to cut us off.
Say one sentence in there, which is, there's a pretty small, to answer your question, there's a pretty small box of things that all women agree on politically now.
Probably so. All right, let's take questions from our viewers. Clark Francis, he asks, if there was no wiretapping, then how do we know that Michael Flynn was talking to the Russians? Who wants to take that first?
Well, they were tapping the Russian ambassador, which is common. If you're a Russian ambassador, you're going to be bugged. It's part of the job. This is our ambassadors are bugged wherever they go to.
Kelly, any thoughts on that?
No, I remember a year or so ago we were talking about, the United States bugging Angela Merkel's phone, and the response from the Democrats and the administration was, well, everybody does it. Yeah. So it's like we were told that everybody was doing it. We shouldn't be surprised that everybody's tapping everybody else now. I mean, it just seems. And
the CIA thing yesterday, they can watch you through your phone and so forth. So it's basically, someone said today, you have, I guess it was Comey,